All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're not just going to talk about philosophy, we're actually going on an investigation. We're going to try and unmask our own moral values, figure out where they really come from. And our guide on this journey? Well, it's none other than one of the most challenging and, frankly, dangerous thinkers in history, Friedrich Nietzsche. So, let me ask you something. Where do your values really come from? I mean, think about it. The things you feel are good or evil, they feel so automatic, right? Almost like they're baked into our DNA. But what if they aren't? What if I told you that these ideas have a secret history, a really, really shocking one? That's what we're doing today. We're putting on our detective hats and tracing these concepts all the way back to the source. So, our lead detective in this whole affair, the man himself, Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher with a hammer. And the case file we're going to be working from is his absolutely explosive 1887 book on the Genealogy of Morals. Now, that philosopher with a hammer line, it's one of his most famous. And it's easy to misunderstand. He's not talking about just smashing things for fun. Think of it more like a tuning fork or a geologist hammer. He's tapping on our most deeply held beliefs, our values, our ethics, to see what they're made of. Do they ring true? Are they solid? Or are they just hollow, echoing ideas from a forgotten time? He's testing the very foundations of what we call morality. And the method he uses for this is what he calls genealogy. You know, it's kind of like philosophical forensics. See, most philosophers before him asked, what is good? Nietzsche flips the question. He asks, wait a minute, where did our idea of good even come from? Who invented it? And what was their motive? He's not just looking at the definition, he's tracing the historical and psychological DNA of our ethics. Okay, so what's the first big clue that Nietzsche digs up in his investigation? It's a bombshell. He realizes that the word good hasn't always meant what we think it means, not even close. In fact, he uncovers two totally different, competing moral codes from the ancient world. On one hand, you had what he calls noble morality. This is the morality of the powerful, the strong, the aristocrats. For them, good was just a description of themselves, strong, vital, noble. And bad wasn't evil. It just meant, well, not like them. Common, weak, simple. But then, something totally different bubbles up from below. He calls it slave morality, and this one values the complete opposite: meekness, humility, sympathy. And here's the game-changing twist. It doesn't just call the nobles bad. It points a finger at them and calls them evil. So the big question is, how on earth did the world flip from one to the other? How did the values of the weak overcome the values of the strong? Well, according to Nietzsche, it wasn't some grand philosophical debate. It wasn't a rational decision. No, it was a quiet, brilliant, psychological coup d'etat. He calls it the slave revolt in morality. And at the heart of this revolt, we find our smoking gun. It's a French word that Nietzsche uses very deliberately: ressentiment. Now, this isn't just regular old resentment or anger. It's deeper. It's a kind of poisonous, stewing hatred that the powerless feel towards the powerful, but they can't act on it. So it gets suppressed, it turns inward, it festers. And here's the absolute genius of Nietzsche's insight: that bottled up energy doesn't just go away. It becomes creative, dangerously creative. So here's how it works. Step one is impotence. The weak are just, well, they're too weak to fight back directly against the strong. So step two, all that hatred and frustration gets suppressed. It's turned inward. But then, step three, and this is the masterstroke, that pent-up energy gets channeled into something incredible. It fuels a total revaluation of all values. It's the ultimate act of psychological revenge. The logic becomes, oh, you think you're good because you're powerful? No, no, no. Your strength is actually evil. And our weakness, our suffering, our humility, that is what is truly good. And for Nietzsche, the most powerful, most successful example of this in all of human history, Christianity. Now, to be clear, this is his analysis. He argued that Christianity was the institution that took this slave morality, perfected it, and broadcast it to the entire Western world. It glorified meekness, framed suffering as a virtue, and made blessed are the poor in spirit the new moral law.
But this moral revolt didn't just change societies and empires. According to Nietzsche, it went deeper. It fundamentally rewired our own internal psychology. And this is where he pinpoints the origin of something we all know very well: the bad conscience.
You know, the idea of guilt wasn't always this deep internal thing. Way back, Nietzsche says, punishment was just a simple transaction. You did something wrong, you owed a debt, you paid it. Simple. But as society grew more complex, we had to start taming our animal instincts, our aggression, our cruelty. And all that energy, with nowhere to go, got turned inward. That's the birth of the bad conscience. Then, he argues, religion came along and supercharged it, turning a simple debt to society into an infinite, cosmic debt owed to God.
So let this sink in for a second. That little voice in your head, the one we call our conscience, the one that makes you feel guilty, for Nietzsche, that is not a moral compass pointing to some objective truth. It's not a guide. It is the sound of your own natural, powerful instincts being locked in a cage and forced to torture themselves. It's an illness, a form of self-inflicted cruelty.
So if life is full of this internal suffering, this self-torture, how do people cope? How do they give it meaning? Well, Nietzsche says this gives rise to something he calls the ascetic ideal. This is the belief that the way to find meaning, the way to be morally pure, is to deny yourself, to deny worldly pleasures, to reject the body, and even to embrace pain as something noble. But here's the ultimate paradox, the final twist in Nietzsche's analysis. He argues that even this seemingly life-denying philosophy is actually a secret, subtle expression of the will to power. Think about it. When you deny yourself, when you master your own desires, when you endure pain that others can't, you are exerting an incredible form of control, power over yourself, and often power and influence over others who look at your so-called purity with awe. Okay, so that's a lot, and it's a fascinating, maybe even a deeply unsettling story from the past. But let's get real for a second. Why should any of this, a 19th century philosophical critique, actually matter to any of us living our lives today? Well, here's why it matters. It matters because, whether we know it or not, we are all still running on the moral software that was coded thousands of years ago during the slave revolt. It's the operating system for our culture. Nietzsche's work is like a massive virus scan. It forces us to actually look at the source code of our own beliefs and ask a really uncomfortable question. Is this program still working for us? Or is it just a legacy system designed to make us feel guilty, weak, and predictable? And his impact was absolutely seismic. I mean, his intellectual fingerprints are all over the last century of thought. You can't really understand Sigmund Freud and the concept of repression without him. You can't understand Michel Foucault's critiques of power without his genealogical method. Existentialism, with its call to create your own meaning, that has Nietzsche written all over it. You see, he didn't just write a book. He fundamentally changed the kinds of questions that philosophy was even allowed to ask. Now, of course, we have to acknowledge he is a deeply controversial figure. And critics have a point when they say he's great at tearing things down, but not so great at offering a clear, concrete alternative. Plus, his very intense, poetic, and often aggressive style has, unfortunately, made his work really easy to misinterpret and misuse over the years, sometimes with terrible consequences. But in the end, that just brings us back to the final, crucial question that Nietzsche really leaves us with. See, he doesn't give us the answers, he just hands us the hammer. He is challenging you to look at your own values, the things you believe in, the rules you live by every single day, and ask yourself some hard questions. Where did these ideas really come from? Do they make you stronger, more alive? Or, and this is the big one, who do they truly serve? You or 2,000-year-old history of resentment? That's the question he leaves ringing in our ears, and it's one only you can answer.